All right, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank the board for the opportunity to present this. As the board is aware, we were authorized by town meeting to move forward with a feasibility study for the DPW facilities back in the spring of 2019. I want to thank Dave and Scott, who've worked real close with Bruce at Thornton Group to get this feasibility study put together, and the board does have that in their packet. It is pretty detailed and lengthy report, roughly 80 pages with documentation, things of that nature. So what I ended up doing was really trying to summarize the overall feasibility, obviously not capturing everything that was in the feasibility report here, but just to talk a little bit about the process. So the feasibility study is to really talk about what the needs are for the department and programming needs as well. Just to get a cost estimate of what we think a facility would cost. If this is approved and the board wants to move forward, it would require us to go to town meeting, at which point we would follow a very similar approach to the South End Fire Station, where we went to the town meeting looking to get funding for OPM services and architectural services so that we can begin working on construction documents and a definitive plan as to what the building project would look like. Again, this is all estimated costs. There are obviously general conditions and assumptions that are built in, because without really diving into construction plans and documents, you really don't have an actual detailed sense of what the cost would be. And obviously, the building floor plan, things of that nature, and the requirements and needs are changing, but we tried to capture as much as we possibly can in this report. So Bruce at Thornton Group came on board. They reviewed the proposed building site. They looked at the development of building and site program, looked at schematic design plans and renderings for us, schematic site plan design, and then, as I mentioned before, provided a cost estimate of the total project costs. Before I move forward, we do have Nate here from Bruce at Thornton Group, and then we also have Dave and Scott online as well. So if you folks have questions, they're here, and I'm sure they'll be jumping in at some point during this presentation. So why a new facility? I know the board is fully aware of why we need a new facility. The DPW building was built in 1950 as an auto dealership. It's clearly insufficient for staffing levels, especially our staffing levels that we currently have here. And as the board is aware, or in the public, anybody that has had the opportunity to go to that space, we've got office space that is very tight as it is currently. We've got lavatories that are not split between female and male. So the only unisex bathroom is actually located right in the office in what is I would describe, and I think some board members have described, as a closet-sized bathroom, which is right in the middle of the office space. So there's no privacy in terms of that. The building itself, obviously, given the fact that it was built in the 1950s, is non-ADA compliant. It lacks the basic infrastructure that you would need for, security, modern IT, equipment, communications, and energy efficiencies. The bays that we're currently dealing with, and the mechanics bay as well, are undersized for a good majority of our vehicles. It lacks the space for workbenches and storage. The infrastructure and the investment that we've made on our equipment and our fleet is not covered. It's left outside. It's exposed to the elements. And I know some people will think, well, DPW is always working during the elements. But we have equipment that's not used year round. And obviously it's left outside as opposed to being in cover. So that really does shrink the useful life of the equipment that we've invested so much money on for the department. So the vehicles, the location that we currently have does not have a wash bay, which is, as most people will know, is critical to the salting operations that we have in particular. So we don't currently have a place where we can hose down the dump trucks and the sanders when they're coming back from salting operations, which creates erosion with the corrosion with the sanders and the dump bodies, and requiring us to constantly upgrade or send them out to get refinished so that they're not completely rusting. And then also with the lack of space that we have when it comes down to training and requirements that we have in terms of OSHA training or other safety trainings that we want to provide to the staff, we have no place to do that. And I do want to point out that Frank will have to pay me because I included his picture of him cutting down a tree in my presentation. So big kudos to him. Okay. So the proposed facility that we were talking about was the Fall River Ave transfer station site. So if anybody was following us a couple of years back when we were in the process of looking for a new cemetery, that's the parcel of land that we've identified for a new facility. So Brewster Thornton Group worked with DPW, as I mentioned earlier, to work on a project program, and this is what we came up with. The administrative building, creating an administrative building would include the reception area for the public. It would include lavatories for the office space. It would have conference rooms and managerial offices for the clerical staff, and then the director and the superintendent and assistant superintendent. The building itself would also include spaces for the crew, which would be lavatory, showers, a break room, locker room. And this is all based on a staff number to accommodate at least 25 crew members. We'll have ample storage, and especially for the build out, workspace, workshop space for the various functions of DPW. The vehicle garage would house all of our large vehicles, which are roughly 20 large vehicles, all of our small equipment space. It also include a drive-in workshop bays. So everybody would be able to pull in. So you pull in one entrance, pull out the other entrance. And it's very conducive to managing the different tasks and the multitasks that DPW has to deal with. It has a mechanics area, which would include 6 light duty lifts, tool and fluid storage, and an office for the mechanic to do the various paperwork and ordering of supplies that is typically required. It would also include the relocation of the fueling station that we currently have at the old facility. And then on top of this larger main facility that we're looking at, we're also looking to add a salt shed. And Dave can speak to the size. I believe it's almost double the size of our salt shed that we have, which is pretty small over on Taunton Ave. And then adjacent to that would be a wash bay for the trucks to pull right in and get hosed down right off the salt shed. And we'll get into the floor plans.
Quick question.
Yep.
See, the one thing that's not included there, I see a radio tower included in the program elements. Is that also?
So we've got the old radio tower from the public safety. So we took that down. We actually stored it over at the transfer station, in particular for either the South End Fire Station or the this facility. And I think it'd be more beneficial for this facility. I'm not sure, given the elevations over the South End Fire Station, we may need a taller antenna over there. Dave, do you want to jump in before we get in and just talk a little bit about, and I moved on a little too quick, and I don't know why this isn't allowing me to go back, but oh, there we go. You talk about the old facility just in terms of, what you're dealing with in terms of current space, storage needs, things of that nature.
Yeah, absolutely, Sean. Thank you. So the existing building here, as Sean mentioned, built in 1950, 71-year-old building. The main building here, when you come to DPW, which houses the admin offices, 3 storage bays, and 2 mechanics bays, it's 7,000 square feet. Of that 7,000 square feet, 2,500 square feet is the administrative, locker, the break room, the bathroom, and the boiler room. So to say we're in tight quarters here is an understatement if you haven't visited the facility. We've been making do, but we're really crammed in over here. No conference room and so on. In regards to the salt shed, you mentioned, Sean, the existing salt shed is pretty much half the size. It's a 2,800 square foot. It's a dome, holds about 1,000 maximum salt we can get in there is about 1,000 ton. The new salt shed is just over twice that size. It will actually hold double the amount of salt, which is always good to have on hand. And the other salt shed that we have now is aging. The fuel stations we have here, the infrastructure would have to be all redone down at the other facility, with the exception of possibly just the fuel pumps themselves. We currently have, as I said, 3 garage bays off the main building, 2 mechanic bays with 1 lift, and in the back of our facility, disconnected, but up in the back area in our parking lot, we have another 3-bay garage for storing the sweeper, lodge sanders, things of that nature, depending on the time of the year.
And then just to, and I know you folks understand this, but for the general public, just in terms of the salt shed itself, I know there's always a question with the board when we get into, September and October in terms of snow preparation and where we stand. Salt is always an issue and a concern to make sure that we have enough on hand. But when you have a salt shed that size, you're limited to as much as you can do. And if you go back 4 years where we had that February storms, it would seem like it was every weekend, every Monday we had a new storm. We were running into a situation where there was such a demand for salt that we weren't able to get it, that we actually had to go borrow some for the state. And Dave can talk a little bit more about that if he wants to. But with the capacity of having it, it protects the town for in the event that we get storms like that and there's a shortage of salt or a shortage of the availability to get the salt delivered, and not necessarily a shortage of the salt, but that just overall helps with the operation and making sure that we have all the safety needs for the town and driving and making sure that our streets are safely plowed.
Not only that, this current design of the dome, when they dump the salt, you can't actually go in and square it up with the bucket, so you lose some salt on the side, and it's just a bad design they put on.
Yeah.
To your point, Sean, and Chris too, I did want to mention the operation of that. We have tractor trailers coming in there 40 foot long, and we have to have an operator up there typically when they're unloading it, because that truck, when it's fully extended, goes right up to the peak of the dome, and they have to be centered. So we know exactly where to have that truck stop to lift the body up, so that when the top of that rig is lifted all the way to the top to empty out the load, it is 2 feet away from the center of the dome. So it's a challenge all around. An operator has to be out there with that when they come in with the salt for the most part, and then pushing it up. The other style that they have today, the more modern, is going to allow them to unload quicker, not necessarily having to have an operator standing by watching, and a lot easier to push that around inside that building. And to your point, Sean, you're always better off stockpiling your salt early in the season to get you through the season as much as you can hold, because you don't know what the season is going to hold, call for. And we were fortunate, Sean, as you mentioned a few years back, with our contacts and everything, to get us, the extra loads of salt we needed to keep the town so safe the way we needed it. So.
And Sean, to give you a perspective, that shed can probably hold enough salt to take care of 3 storms. So again, to your point, if we had 3 or 4 storms in a row, we would be out of salt. So if you had a weekend of consistent storms, we're running right to the end of it, where a new shed would hold house that, and we'd have no problem.
Yeah, and it's not just the storms themselves, but even just the icing, the drop in temperature and things of that nature. So, okay.
So
David,
can you clarify what the size is of the existing salt shed and the salt shed that's going to be provided? Because it sounded, from the program that I'm looking at, it says 1,000 tons is what we're being provided. But I thought I heard Mr. Cabral say we have 1,000 tons.
Yeah, that estimate's probably off.
Well, based on the size of the building itself, Dave, our existing shed that we have is 2,800 square foot, and it's the dome. The other shed is 6,000 square feet.
6,400, Dave, to be exact. The next shed.
Okay. So we will be doubling, if not tripling, our capacity.
Yeah, and with the dome piece, and it's just as Dave had mentioned, the way it's situated is that the trailers can't go all the way back in,
right.
And so it becomes difficult to pile it high enough to where you need to go, because they can't release the bucket up that high without hitting the building.
Yep.
Okay. I don't know why it keeps doing this. Okay, there we go. So we had talked about the salt shed. This is a rendering of the building. So right out front would be the office spaces. Is all one building connecting to a large steel frame garage. Coming around the Department of Public Works there is where the trucks would pull in, go into the garage all the way out. You've also got some garage bays on the side. You'll see more of that in the floor plans as we get there, which you folks have with the feasibility study. This is the overall site plan concept. This is property that is currently owned by, can you see my arrow, by the way?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
This is undeveloped right now. This is land that is owned by the town. It's just trees. If you go down a little bit further, here would be the Legion. So we're actually proposing to open up a new site that's not accessing the American Legion parking lot. So we would have it here. You'd pull off of Fall River Ave, 114A. This would be your salt shed. Here's the wash bay. So they would be pulling in here, getting the salt, coming back in, washing the vehicles, driving. This was the front of the building, the main office building, as I mentioned before. You've got parking here. The DPW trucks would be pulling in here, driving all the way out. And then you've got bays along this area as well, mechanics area. This rendering, and I think Dave has it split out. I just don't want you folks to get confused on this. So this area here is the actual building itself. This is the salt shed, and this is the wash bay that I had showed up in the property at the beginning of the property when you first entered. Just it's on the same drawing, just to give you guys an understanding of what it looks like. So as I mentioned, you'd be driving in here, as you can see by the arrows, all the diagonal spots here for the vehicles that we have. So easy access, not having to move things. You've got some storage here. And I'll turn it over to Scott and Dave so they can talk a little bit more about the actual planning and the thought behind this. Here is what you would see is the office space coming in. Your entrances, your offices, your conference room, and then you've got your separate rooms here with the lavatory break rooms and for the crew and the staff, and then they go directly into and have access into this entire building. Originally, what we were looking to do when we first looked at this was having this site right here, the office up front where the salt shed was with the bays, and then just doing a garage facility for the guys. Didn't make any sense because the training area was going over there. Then you had people lining up to go in there to walk all the way down to actually get into their vehicles here. And then having two separate buildings, when you look at the cost, didn't make a whole lot of sense. So we've combined this entire portion to be one continuous building. Just obviously the intent would have to be to draw as we're pulling in, when people want to come in, just making sure that we're drawing them directly into the office space, which I think the site plan did a good job of. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dave and Scott.
So if you want, I'll just quickly speak on the layout of the larger fleet parking areas. These spaces were designed to not only accommodate the truck, but also the plow. So that will stay indoors all year long. And it's also to accommodate a growing fleet. It's not just the current fleet that we have. So we have space in there for at least 3 to 4 additional vehicles as our fleet grows. We felt that the one-way in method and one-way out saves a lot of money on garage doors, which are very expensive. So we figured one large garage door at each entrance, and with like a herringbone parking pattern, you can fit the entire fleet in there with no issues at all.
That also cuts down on the requirement for the width of the building somewhat. If we tried to have it parking in 90 degree, but we try to look at a lot of different things to keep the building envelope down, but also have the functionality of what we need to do.
As you can see, the mechanics bay has the space for 6 lifts. Currently, we're using 1, so this will be a tremendous improvement. At any given time, we could have 2 police cruisers and then our fleet that needs to be worked on at the same time. This will allow us to do so. One
of the other key things in here too, if you look as you're going in the main entrance and the bays to the far left corner, there's the potential there to allow vehicles to have a trailer, whether it's a chipper attached to one of our trucks or a trailer with the landscape equipment on it that's going to go out for the week, to park in the last two bays and utilize the overhead doors. So those very last two bays in the bottom left would allow that to happen, which is a functionality of the department. And then outside, the three arrows that are pointing in along the bottom in the mid-left section there, that would allow us to have a chipper or something stored exactly right in there. A hot box could be placed in there so we can pull up with one of the vehicles, hook up the hot box and pull it out of there, put it back indoors at the end of the day. Same thing with the chipper, the Terex, you know, whatever it is that we might have going on given the time of the year, those are going to be valuable to us to be able to hook up and go and get ready for the next day's work.
And we're seeing the increasing need in maintenance, so we're actually create a couple of maintenance workshops along those days that Dave was talking about, as well as the sign shop, foreman area. Functioning workspaces was critical as part of this design.
I would like to jump over just to have a little discussion on the administrative portion too. As we developed this was worked on prior to COVID, and then COVID came into play. We actually ended up adding 2 public bathrooms off the lobby, essentially so that if we ever had a situation down the road where we wanted to keep the admin staff separated from the DPW crew, we would have to potentially use the bathrooms up front and not have to have everybody using the same portion of the facility. We can kind of isolate the workers from the admin staff. We have a conference room in there, which would probably be an area that we would use for plan review, storage for you know, filings and all that. We have very limited space down here. Anybody who's been up, our storage is all around us in the office. And we also looked at designing the break room, not only to be a break room, but to have it set up so that if we have training exercises for the staff, we can hold it in that room, rearrange and reconfigure that space so we can all be facing a screen or an instructor or whatever the case may be. So we tried to incorporate as much functionality, you know, from a practical standpoint as we thought feasible for multiple uses of this space.
If anybody wants an idea on logistics on size, that garage portion is almost 25,000 square feet.
So the mechanics lifts are inside of a separate bay?
No, they have the drive, that's part of the main building. As you can see, there's a drive-in and drive-out on both ends. So if you have one on a lift, you can drive out of either side of that bay.
Yeah, I know, that's what I'm
It's
saying.
actually-
It's being isolated within the building.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
It's under the same roof. Is that what you mean?
No, what I'm saying is you're building walls within the building to segregate it. And I'm wondering why.
Well, the only segregation will be the outside garage doors. Those are probably open bays at the end. Is that what you mean?
No,
At the
Scott,
far
you're
end
not,
of the free lift?
you're not understanding my question.
He's talking about here. So the concern, the original conversation was about the concerns with the fumes and the smells associated with some of the mechanic areas, I believe, and that's why there's that partition.
Yeah, but the same. I don't know.
That's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, it is the area I'm talking about, and I mean, I just don't see the need for the segregation because you're dealing with the same fumes, the same everything with vehicles driving in and out. It could be open. That's all that I'm looking at. And I know, Mr. Kadim, in prior conversation, you had pointed out, but where are the women's locker rooms? In shower areas?
Yeah,
so
Scott.
the locker room area itself is not necessarily a changing area. We had talked about providing the shower areas, and we have 2 shower areas in here besides some of the restrooms we have. So from a practical standpoint, the locker room, if you're changing into rain gear, you're going in your locker, you're grabbing your rain gear. If you're going out using a chainsaw, all your stuff is in your locker to grab for your accessories, if you will. But we have separate showers and we have separate bathrooms to allow for changing areas and separate shower space as needed.
So
Okay,
you
so
see-
And that's something we discussed
Unisex, right?
over time too, yeah, kind of like unisex or
Unisex
they
bathroom.
can be used for whatever.
so you're not gonna be changing inside of that locker area. You're not stripping down.
Exactly.
That's correct. And Dave, we did have some discussions, we can certainly have more, but we did have discussions on the mechanics area. We were not just trying to define a space for them, but we were trying to, as Sean kind of alluded to, the work in the garage at times, depending on what they're doing there with the welding and painting and body work, whatever it might be, even in the facility that we're in, which is attached to the building with a door that closes, those fumes migrate in, and, you know, if there's no need to, they can leave the door open, but when we want to contain it a little bit, because there is the hallway that would go off to the break room where guys can be coming in and out, that's something that we did look at there for providing that wall. I just, you know, we tried to spend some time trying to figure out where we needed walls and where we don't, and for the most part, we tried to leave it as open as we could in there, but I just wanted to, you know, bounce back to that for a minute too.
Yep, no.
Mr. Cabral.
Fine, hold on, Mr. Zara. Mr. Vieira's had his hand up here. I just want to get to him
Okay.
real quick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two things, David Cabral or Scott. The break room. I commend you for tying them both together, a break room and obviously a meeting room, training room, whatever you want to call it. But my opinion, in my opinion alone, it's not fair for your clerical staff if they're on break or they're having their lunch to eat at their desk because the break room is being occupied as a training room that day. I would suggest that you find a separate spot to accomplish those tasks. Although obviously it's a big room and you could accomplish both things, again, I don't think it's fair for the secretary or the clerical staff to not obviously entertain an area to relax away from their work area because again, the break room is being utilized. But where the arrow, or excuse me, where the doors are in the training room, break room, whatever you want to call it, are those bathroom facilities, and excuse me for my ignorance, but
Kind of hard to see on a small screen.
So I'm sorry,
Yeah,
what
it is.
was the question?
View options.
where the break room is, the swinging doors or the doors here are up more and to the right.
Here?
To the right now. Nope, to the, a little bit more to the right. Right
This one?
there. Are those bathroom facilities?
Yeah, these are all bathrooms over here, yep.
Good idea, but I don't think it's going to be too pleasant to have a bathroom facility right across from a break room or a lunchroom, whatever you want to call it. I mean, I don't have a problem with them being there, but maybe the doors could be on the opposite side instead of exiting or entering through the break room to go into the bathroom facility. Just a suggestion. Sean, that's one of the things we heard when we were designing or looking at designs for the fire station at the south end, the concerns of the dispatchers, if you remember. So
Yep.
maybe you want to think about addressing that, obviously, while we're going through the architectural phases. And the other thing is, I see you list, I believe, 6 lifts, light-duty lifts. Would it be in our best interest to have at least 2 heavy-duty lifts so that you could put a 6-wheel dump truck or just lift it off the ground a little, or not put it up in the air totally, but swap 2 of those spots out maybe for a heavy-duty lift? You guys would know better, but please?
Right, I'm gonna try to answer. We got a bunch of questions here.
Okay, I'm
I'm
sorry.
gonna get to a couple of them before I forget. So I'll do the list first. You're exactly right. We just did 6 as a placeholder, but we're looking into going with at least 4 light duty, maybe 1 real heavy duty, or possibly 2 heavy duty. So great point there. We are looking at that.
Good.
As far as the clerical staff taking break while there's a conference going on, we would be conscious of that in our scheduling of our conferences. But they also take break almost the same time as them, their lunch break, so that might not conflict with them that often as far as that goes.
And Dave, we don't tend to have the training sessions all that often, and I would say that the conference room would be the alternate place for the, you know, the times where we might have something going on.
Right.
It is pretty limited in that regard, but I don't see that being a big concern, you know?
But my thing is, while we're planning the facility, let's do it right once, because you're gonna live with this for the next 100 years. I mean, we won't see it, but the town of Seekonk will never, and I've said this with the fire facilities, the town of Seekonk will never build another DPW garage like this. So let's do it right, and then we don't have to worry about it.
Well, I got 100 years to go before I can retire, so I might see it.
Maybe, and God bless you if you can.
And I just want to, this is just conceptual drawings. These are not anything that's, you know, etched in stone with any type of, you know, permanent floor plan. That would obviously be with the building committee to really kind of work if this is something that's supported by town. But it was really just trying to get a conceptual idea of what we were looking for and cost associated with it. So I'm sure there's going to be, you know, tweaks here and there as we go through it and work with architects to really kind of sit down and lay the entire building out in great detail.
I agree, and that's a positive thing. My only concern is once a seed is planted, it starts to take roots, and then the next thing you know, it's carved in stone.
Right.
I just see it as something that could be a stumbling block at some point in time. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Zora, you're next, and then I'll get you to Mr. Petronio.
All right, to Mr. Cabral and Andre, when I was looking at the designs, as you're saying, the segregation in the mechanics bay, I was taking it as so they could put the heat up if they're working in the cold winter, so it's not putting heat into the rest of the building, so they can kind of climate control their area, along with the fumes. I get the fumes, it's going to go throughout the building regardless, the same fumes on the other side, but that's the way I took it. Is there any truth to that?
Absolutely, yeah. We don't need to have that larger space for the vehicles, you know, much above 50, 55 degrees, say. That would certainly lend itself to keep the mechanics area isolated and just keep them up to temperature, comfortable, compared to the rest of that large storage area, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Petronio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So and forgive me, we're obviously seeing a conceptual drawing. I get that. I understand that the Bright Idea Fairies is going to pay a visit very often here in the design process, and hopefully it works its way out and we get all of the great things that we need to have in our facility. My question for a moment is going to center around safety. And unfortunately, I'm an OSHA 30 trained. Yes, I did that course. And with noise and fumes, I heard you mention often about the doors, working on vehicles indoors, the ventilation, and all that stuff. And forgive me if I may have missed it, but are we talking at all about what's the requirements for the HVAC for that, and the coating on the walls in order to keep the noise down from obviously from work being conducted next to an administrative office?
Mr. Kadim.
Yeah, and it also should have the extract system with the ventilation that hooks right onto the exhaust. So that'll all be part of it too.
Like the fire department. I mean, I think that's in the code.
Exactly.
I think that's in the code.
But the noise and the volume and the fumes next to, you know, you have those inside doors, as Mr. Andre pointed out too, which, you know, I just don't know, because that book is extremely huge off the top of my head, whether or not that all meets the correct.
So
Yeah, but I think that's where the design professionals that are going to be designing the building will come in to handle all of that.
ultimately, that's a consideration that they need to make when they do the final.
Yeah.
But I think that, David, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's all dictated by the code, correct?
It is.
Right.
So,
Okay. Fair enough. I just want to make sure that that's some of the reasoning, especially for those that are watching that may not understand why we're having parts of these conversations, especially, you know, fumes, you know, noise control. Those are all considerations that have to be in play when designing a building of this type.
yeah, it's all good points.
Could I ask that we circle back to the prospective site plan or the conceptual site plan? Mr. Kadim, that you showed? So when this popped up, my initial question is what the reasoning was behind shifting the building closer to the residential development rather than shifting it further to, and I want to say plan south, or even doing a mirror image of the building over that dashed line to bring the building to the opposite side, and give more of a buffer between the residential area.
Landfill.
Yeah.
That's landfill area?
Yep.
Okay.
We did look into that, and we actually did a couple of test pits out there to determine exactly the limits of the trash, and we pushed the envelope of the building as close to the trash line as we could without building it on the trash, and that's one of the other reasons that led to the the salt shed in particular getting moved out front, was trying to make space so that we could keep that building tight up against the trash and as far away to create a little buffer, or the biggest buffer we could provide between the residential on the buildable space on that.
That answer, the landfill is the answer. I mean, I just didn't realize that it moved, that the landfill extended all the way up to basically that dashed line, because that's a lot further than I thought it went.
There is some virgin land, though, and quite a bit of it in that area.
Based on the
Yeah, where the
position of the
building
building and the explanation that was just given, it looks like it's from that dashed line plan north and nothing south.
Yeah.
Right.
When you look in the package and when you see the aerial on it, that's what it looked like, and it had the landfill marked out. Yeah.
That's correct. The edge of the building is very close to the tree line.
Okay. Do we have any other questions right now? Mr. Kadim, you want to continue?
Yep. So, sorry. So the final slide is just the project cost associated with it. Again, just estimates in terms of what we were looking at. So over on the left side is the projected construction cost. Over on the right side will be additional contingencies, and we'll get through it. So architectural for the building, $3.9 million rounded up. Fire suppression is going to cost us about $200,000. Plumbing is just under $225,000. HVAC, $500,000. Electrical work, $1.3 million. Site work is going to be $2.7 million. So the total cost associated with that is $8.8 million. General conditions, obviously, different assumptions going in there. At 13%, $1.1 million, bringing the total construction costs to 9.9. Then you've got a contingency for design of 10%. That's coming in at $1 million. Escalation, if it goes over a year, of 3.5%, is just about $350,000. Furniture, fixtures, and equipment allowance at $500,000. Contingency for the projects, just under $1.2 million. Architectural and engineering fees of $1.2 million. Survey allowance $5,000. OPM costs, based on some costs that we're seeing coming in from South End Fire Station, that's a little light, but some of these are just assumptions. So some of these numbers can fluctuate quite a bit on there. It's just trying to get a placeholder in this. Just so the OPM costs $500,000. So total estimated project costs $14.6 million. And again, that's adjustments that can be made in terms of layout, but looking at what we're looking for, as Mr. Vieira had mentioned, long term, to maintain 100 years, so we're not coming back and fully providing a building that's adequate for the multiple different demands that are coming out from DPW. That's the total project cost. And then last slide is just a thank you. Questions? I know we've been asking questions as we've gone through. Are there any additional questions?
I'd just like to make a statement. I think it's something that's long overdue. I don't know how those folks have been able to get the productivity out of the building that they're in. As you mentioned earlier, that used to be Bow Motors back in the 1950s. Then it went to DPW. Then it went to when the police station moved out of the old town hall, the police department went there and it was shared with the DPW. So that building has been rehabbed and rehabbed and rehabbed over and over and over again, and it's long overdue. And as mentioned earlier by the previous speaker, things don't get cheaper to build, they get more expensive each and every year. So I think it's time, you know, we take a serious look at it and decide what we need to do.
Okay, at this time, I have Mr. Ginsburg from Brewster Thornton on. If you wanted to make a comment here. Caroline, can you let him in, please?
Yeah, he's on.
Okay.
He had answered
There he
one of
is.
the questions.
Yep, I had answered. I did want to commend folks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to speak. I did want to commend folks for their thoughtful questions. I think there's a lot of detail, and I can really sense that people want to jump in and explore kind of all the possibilities of this building. We did isolate the mechanics bays because they're heated in the summer. Heated in the winter, but also because they're cooled in the summer. The exhaust requirements are going to be slightly different. So keeping the mechanical costs low, we needed to isolate that area. We also were planning a separation between the two buildings of a concrete block firewall that would also be acoustic separation. So there would be a good separation between the two buildings. So thank you for your questions. And just to reiterate what was just said, the need is apparent. So our first meeting to really assess the building and understand the program was held in a lunchroom that did not have technology, that presentations were made in spaces where there were ad hoc seats and tables. So clearly the need is there. We did observe mechanics that were working in conditions and sort of getting through conditions that were not standard to this age, and equipment that is being stored outside that is not going to last as long as it should. So I think the investment is worthwhile, and I think in the long run it will save money through operational costs and equipment costs.
Thank you, Mr. Ginsburg. Are there any other questions from any other members?
I would just make a statement. I would encourage all the public through Mr. Kadim or Dave Cabral's office to, if they want to set up a tour, to go look at this building, and just so they have an understanding of the insides and the outsides. I know COVID's here, but if they could set up a tour, if people want to get a tour to see exactly what they're working in, I would say that would be a good start.
Maybe as time gets closer to making the decision and going before town meeting in the ballot, maybe we offer an open house, and whoever comes, obviously they'll be that much better informed than the ones that don't.
Yeah.
Well, spring town meetings are around the corner, so that's why we're getting there. We're getting close.
So, I will only add to this. First of all, I want to appreciate all the work that got put into this by Mr. Kadim, Mr. Cabral, Mr. Lobry. Thanks to the Brewster Thornton group, for looking at this and spending all the time that you have. Obviously, COVID has delayed, this presentation quite a bit and caused some delays. I will say, when I started on the finance committee in 2015, the first task I had, being on that committee, was to go down. I was the DPW liaison, and Mr. Cabral had just started. I went down to go meet him, and he showed me around the facility, and I was in awe of, the conditions and the shape that the building was back in 2015. So to say that this is long overdue is an understatement. These guys have, worked with the best they could, and in that particular facility. And, this facility, I think, stands to protect the equipment that we're spending. I mean, every year we're getting more and more equipment that's costing us hundreds of thousands of dollars. We need that to last as long as we possibly can. And I think this, this kind of facility will help, make that equipment last. And Lord knows we have some very resourceful employees at DPW, that do all that they can. And I think they've put all the patchwork and Band-Aids on that building, but, now is the time to get them the building, needed for, better working conditions as well, along with protecting our equipment. So, that said, is there any other members have anything else?
Well, it seems like that's what we do best is Band-Aids, Band-Aids. But after a while, the Band-Aids don't work anymore. And I think we're at that point with this facility.
Yep.
I just want to say, I think it's right that we're looking at the DPW, and in my humble opinion, and I think many board members and residents share my opinion, is this floats to the top of my to-do list for the town. DPW needs to be fixed because it's the core of our infrastructure.